Hey, look, we reached day 700. That's cool. Well, not much else has happened between day 600 and 700. So, here's a tier list. We're gonna be making a tier list. Now, there are a few conditions for a tier list, which are that I tend to be more on the purist side, which is to say that if you have 20 operators in the best tier possible, you've probably done goofed. So this is going to be for the absolute creme de la creme, so to say. Those in rest in peace are, well, actually I guess I should go over what exactly makes an operator fit for a certain tier or not. So this is the reclamation algorithm, critical contention, and specifically for the push. If you intend to use those operators for the regular array and deal with the different raids, usually the higher tier are going to be completely overkill, but you can still absolutely use them. It's just that you are going to have a lot of options in Rest in Peace, or indeed that, well, are actually fine in a regular array. It's just that, yeah, it's specifically just for dealing with raids. So what are we looking at? When we take a look at our operators, we don't want physical damage because all the enemies have basically infinity defense, apart from just the original slugs, because they start with literally 0, so no matter how many days away now you set. And you want AoE, you want arts, true damage or elemental damage, you want crowd control, you want range, and if you don't have any of these, you can also bring some utility, or you have some very special features that makes it that you actually can get out of the graveyard that is going to be there. A lot of operators are going to be ripped because a lot of them just bring mostly physical damage with little to no utility, and so that's not a good place to be in this mode. So, one last thing, I'm going to evaluate the operators based on what we currently have on CN. So to pick one example, Unictus right now on global does not have a module, but on CN we should be getting that same reclamation algorithm specific module, which happens to be particularly good. I'll go in slightly more detail as we get to her. So, spoiler alert, there will be some CN operators revealed. If you don't want to see them, possibly skip this video. Without further ado, let's get to it. Ochiguma, rest in peace. We don't want to rely on energy to stay alive, and most defenders won't do much without a bunch of utility. Zarya, starting strong. Zarya is actually really good. I'm gonna put her in S tier. The reason why she is so good is because, for some reason, she provides 55% arts fragility. Like, she increases the arts damage taken by enemies by 55%, but it doesn't count as arts fragility, so can I actually stack with it. On top of it, very large range. She is a melee operator, so she can be placed basically anywhere without the issues. And yeah, she can also provide some heals while you deal with damage reflect enemies. The short of it is, damage amplification is crucially important, and especially so if you are trying to press down Alrafik, because it's 55%. The only biggest damage amplifier source that you have available would be Gnosis, but Gnosis needs to actually freeze enemies to apply a 60% fragile, so not the best. Sketty, no utility to speak of. Bye-bye. Schwartz, no utility to speak of. Elagur, no. Maganon is... I think Maganon, I don't have her build, but she is particularly good because you do have a module that makes it so that the first summon does not cost deployment slot, and her skill 1 is a very reliable AoE bind that also doesn't deal damage to enemies. So if you have damage reflect enemies, she's one of the few that can actually deal with it. Mostima, she has AoE, she has crowd control, she does give some SP back to operators. The slow is not the best due to the absolutely insane downtime that it has, and you have options that tends to be able to provide a slow that's not quite as strong, but just with much better uptime overall. So still very good pick overall, A tier. Blaze D. The reason she's in D is because technically with her talent she can be immortal for I think it's 7 or 8 seconds depending on potentials, so you can absolutely use her for this if you don't have Spectre or Spectre Alter as a way to split box some enemies and make sure that you have someone who is not going to die. This point is going to be relevant for a few other operators. Reason that she's in D is that, well, Spectre and Spectre Alter are just better at it because the effect just lasts longer and you have more control over it, generally speaking. Ak. He provides 50 attack speed. I'm gonna be placing him in... Is it A or B? It's not required because for dealing with Alarific you actually have enough tools available outside of Ak that you don't need him specifically, but the fact that increases attack speed by a bunch is interesting. He's mostly going to be used either for Alarific or combined with like Lean or Canadian to just boost them by a lot and deal a lot more damage. Generally speaking, for a lot of operators you can usually, especially in A, B and C, and also why is it? Let me correct this for a moment. There we go. I didn't notice that A was there. Overall, you can move the operators up and down by 1 rank. 9. She has some shields, I guess, on deploy. It's about the only thing that she does. But you got better options, so whatever. Chen. You don't really care about offensive recovery support, so whatever. QB is an easy S tier. She's the only reason you can kill Arafic in the first place, so yeah. Bagpipe. You don't really care about having additional SP on deploy because you already have logistic buffs. So if you're on headquarters or outpost, your vanguards will already be able to use their skills basically instantly. So she's not going to do anything. Even outside of Ruse, usually you have other tools that are simply more potent than what a talent provides, so kind of whatever. Phantom is a faster deploy, has some crowd control. It's not the best at it, but it's certainly an option. It's just that fast deploys are in a bit of a weird spot because of the double redeployment cooldown, so they still have some utility. For example, there's a food that makes it that all the enemies within a decent area get pulled towards the operator, so you can always find some use cases for them. On top of this, they still are fast-ish to redeploy with a certain food that reduces the redeployment cooldown by 50%, so options. Regular W. She can spam some stuns. It's not the most reliable thing, but it's true AoE. She's not going to be doing that much damage. She's probably between C and B. I'm gonna stick her in C. Weedy. I don't think Weedy is necessary. I don't think she's quite S tier, but shifting is a relevant tactic, especially combined with a lot of slow, and that's at least on A tier easily. Rosa. She does have a bind, but the rest is physical damage, and the bind is not that long duration. She can't perma-bind target, so nope. Suzuran. Technically, you have smoke launchers that can also apply fragile for a decent amount. Not quite to Suzuran's level, but it's close enough. That said, smoke launchers also cost a bunch of resources, and she's going to save you on some lightning ore. And she's just extremely useful overall for both crowd control, much like Mostima, but on top of it, the fragile effect is more valuable, and the X-trailing is a nice extra for when you're dealing with damage reflect enemies. Thorns. I did mention that there'll be scene spoilers. So on... It's still RIP, even though on CN is getting a module that is going to apply nervous impairment. Nervous impairment, when dealt by friendly operators, will apply an effect called paralysis, which is going to prevent the next 3 attacks. The issue with this is that most of his damage is physical, so basically it's going to be reduced to minimum, and his arts damage is not going to be sufficient to apply the status effect reliably. So you just have much better options if you want to stall bosses, and he's not going to do anything against everyone else, so that's why he's RIP, sorry. Eunictus, Zumama. If we are taking a look at her in global, she's an easy RIP. If we are taking a look at Cien, which is what we're doing, she's definitely between A and S tier. I think she's probably, if we have Magellan in A, I think we can put her in S tier. The taunt effect that she does with her module has an absolutely massive range and is basically forcing all the, well, not the operators, but all the enemies to add a checkpoint to her position. So what I'm going to do, actually, we can actually check her kit. If I do pick her module, I will pick it with specifically only level 1, because level 2 and 3 are getting extra block during skill duration. Now it's not too big of a deal if you still pick with skills, because ultimately what you want to be using is skill 2, and skill 2 will stun all block targets for the duration of the skill. The reason we want skill 2 is because it has just better cycling compared to skill 3. So this is the better option over, well just simply over skill 3. We don't really care about the rest because just giving physical fragility to enemies won't do anything. Even 40% added to nothing is still nothing, so. Easy way to control an entire raid that doesn't depend on weight. Yeah, easy S tier. SURTR. Sadly, SURTR does not scale at all well. She just doesn't scale at all later on. You don't want to bring a wool hospital to keep her alive because her damage just isn't anywhere near what QB can achieve. Having to bring a bunch of operators to keep her alive doesn't really make a lot of sense when you can just bring a bunch of operators that can deal damage without requiring a bunch of healing. So, sorry. Vanguards and DP are interesting ones, because usually you want one of two things. Either you want burst DP, because you have a stage which starts with a bunch of enemies rushing in which case you really want to have those units that can bring a lot of DP in right now, or you want someone with a lot of generation. And Siege is not really doing any of this, so she's still serviceable, but that's a D. Let me shine. You don't really have much synergy with defensive recovery, because obviously if you lock enemies you're gonna explode, and her sleep is not very good because, well, for one, you can't guarantee a full uptime on it, and secondly, even if you did, you prevent your operators from actually attacking the enemies. So in the end, you could possibly elite drop her at some point on the Ringbringer to split box the Ringbringer while also putting the enemies to sleep. So I guess I could put her in D, but frankly, operators in D tier, you probably don't want to use them if given another option. Rosemontes, Rose Scout. She does have skill 2, which is on AoE stun, but it is pretty unreliable. The stun is not that long, it is RNG based. She can be used to kill the explosive slugs that the Ringbringer spawns, I guess. So yeah, she's here. Mudrock. Mudrock is used for basically one thing and one thing only, which is to bait the shots from the Serrator. Yes, she does have shield, but she doesn't regenerate wounds fast enough to be all that interesting. So that said, if you have the Serrator, you can just combine Mudrock plus Mitum to constantly bait some shots. So just because she saves you a bit of sanity by allowing you to do something else than having to micromanage a Serrator for 20 minutes, Yeah, she's still in D. Manticore, easy, massive movement speed reduction, always nice. Mountain, if you'd like to cope, you could say, oh hey, you can use the skill free, but no, don't. Arcto doesn't do anything. Nightingale, she's a healer technically, you could use the KGs to bait, but it's mostly for the baits that the phantoms provide. I guess a bit for the resistance, because you do have the damage reflect enemies, which reflect art damage. Yeah, she has a she has a foot in grave. So shining, oops, increasing defense when enemies are still going to one-shot you anyway, not the best thing. Ifrit is absolute insanity. She still has the biggest arts, well, no, the biggest res reduction as of today, still, on top of being AoE, on top of being able to apply burn, on top of being used for RFA, she does a lot of things. Aya, caster, is the same thing, but much worse. It's much less AoE, less range, and less res reduction. Mostly she's going to be used to slightly speed up the killing of some raids, but it's just nowhere near as useful. I guess I can still put her in B. Exu doesn't do anything. Angelina provides weightless globally, and with SP cost down food can do it reliably. She also gives some attack speed if you want to reach some breakpoint on some operators, like Chubai for example, and she provides some regeneration if you are in Thunderstorm and you don't want to use some of the tools that are available to you for some reason. You could use her recovery a bit. Silver Ash. I think I'm going to put him in B. The Rich Permanent cooldown is not that interesting, but it is a passive invisibility reveal that can be placed on the ground. So if you have a raid with invisible enemies and a bunch of ranged enemies, it can be difficult sometimes to find a spot for, well, some of the other ways to reveal invisibility. So it's pretty nice. Other than this, is not doing much else, but when you have to deal with a raid with invisible enemies, you're going to be very happy to have him, unless you have Ines, in which case it's going to be used once every 70 or 80 days. Amiga doesn't do anything. Project Red, basically like Phantom, just used for the AoE stun, plus maybe the skill 1 to bait some attacks, usually from the Accelerator. That's basically it. Clifford, pull is so much weaker than push because there are a bunch of target limits most of the time, so yeah, you can't really do anything with her. Effiter, however, is absolutely amazing because being able to push any number of enemies at a fairly long range on a fairly low cost is extremely valuable. Istina slows down a very limited number of enemies, but basically is still not particularly reliable. Bye-bye. Provence does nothing. Blue Poison is going to do nothing. Firewatch is going to do nothing. Meteorite reduces defense, if I remember, but that does nothing. Platinum does nothing. Pramanix, she reduces the res of enemies within range by 30%, which is obviously worse than Ifrit, because Ifrit does it by 40% on top of having skill 3, which both deals AoE arts damage at a long range and also reduces by a flat 20. It's just that Ifrit is that busted. That being said, if you are dealing with some enemies, again, with some damage reflect, you might be looking for an option to reduce the res in a fashion without having just your supporter exploding. So she's serviceable. Savage does nothing. Meyer, I think Meyer can stun the enemies, but if you have to rely on summon and then activate a skill to stun them, nah, just no. Sora, you could technically cope a little bit with Sora because you can actually stall the enemies a decent bit. She's not the best combo, but she's meant to be combined with other people. It's not great, but that's still something we'll take. Spectre, regular Spectre, regular Spectre. I think regular Spectre can also be placed here. She's not the best option when it comes to speedboxing a boss, but specifically for Windbreaker, she is good enough. She's not going to be used for much else, but that's fine. Lapland technically as Silence. Now, Silence is not going to be relevant in too many scenarios against maybe Refraction enemies. Explosives, like explosive slugs, you don't really care because you can just use a bunch of flingers with crowd control to kill them easily away from all your operators, so it's mostly going to be for Refraction. So once in 1,000 moons you can end up using her. Indra doesn't do anything, Nirl is not going to do anything, Liscom, you'd think you could do some combo with SP, but nope. It's just not convenient enough, especially when you have a bunch of SP batteries available, some SP cost down food, etc, etc. Vulcan doesn't do enough. Texas. Funny thing about Texas, I do have a notepad somewhere where I take a look at how much DP returns you'd expect from different operators when you deploy them, cast a scale, and retreat them. It turns out that Texas is actually better than Mutual in that regard, assuming you get her potentials and her module. So that's still worth mentioning. Croissant. Technically, skill 2 does have a shift, but it's a defensive recovery and you're not going to be blocking anything, so bye-bye. Granny doesn't do anything, Swire doesn't do anything, Glaucus is an easy S tier. Glaucus provides bind. There is no enemy in RA CC that is immune to bind. That's pretty useful, because that means you can lock down even the Tomb Keeper. I'm gonna manage it. The Tomb Keeper Grotesque, or the Gargoyles. The flying gargoyles from Dublin, chapter 9, that are a pain to deal with. In fact, you can both bind these and another boss at the same time. So I had the gargoyles while dealing with a Windbringer raid, which can be a bit tough to deal with. But she just didn't care. You just give her enough SP batteries. That's probably the only issue that she has, is that usually she wants 3 SP batteries and possibly another one to support, give her a bit of extra SP, so Suzerain or Ptilopsis. Possibly with food that gives SP recovery when deployed, well, to allies within range, and she will be able to permabind an entire raid. So, on top of this, long range, AoE, true AoE, and arts damage. And there's a crowd controls that works on everyone. So, easy S tier. Ceylon, nope. Anesthesia, nope. Flamerigger, nope. Executor, nope. Breeze, nope. Waifu. She's a faster deploy. That's basically the only thing that she has. The shift is not going to do anything. The silence is not going to be particularly relevant. I'm gonna put her in. She's still a little more useful than the other one, so see. Zima, basically like Siege. Bison. Yeah, he doesn't do anything. Reed, Vanguard doesn't do anything. I think it's Broca. He has some arts damage, but it's multi-target, it's not true AoE, and it's not that good, so no. Grapefruit doesn't deal anything but physical damage. Snow Sand is a puller, and pullers are just completely shafted here. It doesn't do anything. Lazy is multi-target, arts damage is pretty potent, and she can get good uptime on her skill. She's mostly there to speed things up. I would argue she's more useful than SURTR, so she can stay in D. Bybeak. If Bybeak had no target cap on her skill 2, she will actually be able to permastun a raid. Sadly, this is not the case, so she is going to be used mostly as a backup scenario, mostly to stun the Dauntless Linebreaker. You don't want to be using her if you have other options up here, but oh well, go start somewhere. Caesar is all about physical damage, that's too bad. Shamare. In the early days, Shamare is very nice because 50% death and attack shred is It's a lot, and it allows the physical damage dealers to be relevant for slightly longer. Slightly, this gets capped fairly easily, so she ends up doing nothing. Synopsis. SP recovery for everyone is actually pretty damn valuable, because sometimes you have some operators on the ground, mostly ambushers, and you want to give them extra SP support, but there is not that much room for you to give said SP batteries, and she is able to provide some support from range. Healing we don't really care about, it's just for the SP support, and overall it's very nice. It just allows you to have that little gap of safety. For example, if you have an Orpionus, you want your Orpionus to have some good SP recovery to ensure that there are no frames during which the enemies can move when you spam his S3. So she's helping in that regard. I think she can be in A or B. Okay, maybe A is a bit too much because she isn't really necessary. She's just like a... She's here to make things more comfortable. SURTR doesn't do anything. Elysium is nice. Elysium is nice. B. Asbestos doesn't do anything. Tsukinogi is technically an invisibility reveal. She's kind of a copium invisibility reveal. But she's an invisibility reveal nonetheless, so... Here we go. Absinthe. Just single target arts damage is not going to be good enough. Leonard is true AoE arts damage with a tiny bit of raise down, but it's nowhere near good enough to justify using. Aeroscape has some buff to attack speed, which is useful to reach some breakpoint. He does have some arts damage, but it's like, whatever. Phoenic also does some AoE arts damage, but we don't care about the inning, it's just much better option, so... Is she deserving of D? Nah. Beastwax. Sadly for Beastwax, the summon is more for drawback than anything, because very often, if you have... How do I put it? If you have a bunch of ranged enemies in front of you, you often don't want to have things that are going to throw a bunch of summons at the enemy, because if there is any kind of splash, you might just kill your operators because of this, which leaves her with a skill that is not all that great. It's still an AoE, arts damage, she still have her other skill, you probably shouldn't be using her, but it's better than nothing. Chevy, just like Siege and Zuma. Silence, standard version, doesn't do anything. Scene, invisibility reveal, and she's better than Tsukinogi, so here she goes, next to Silver Ash. Adrena doesn't do anything, Tomimi doesn't do anything, Flame doesn't do anything. We have the elite operators, they don't exist here. Mint is just like Beastwax, so here you go. April is really good for exploration in regular array. So if you have April, Builder, if you give her some reduced redeployment time by 50%, you can drop her, retreat her, and you get her back basically instantly. So definitely do get her. Sadly, this is RA CC, so rest in peace. Warfarine. You'd think that maybe you could make use out of the SP on kill or the attack buff. No. No, it's just not good enough. All-Star does have an AoE bind, but it's not reliable enough because the attack interval is way too freaking bad. It also comes with some true AoE arts damage technically, so is more of a copium option. I'm really struggling to find some good options out there. So I guess you can stay in D, but yeah, he's almost in the graveyard. Whizlash doesn't do anything. Whispering doesn't do anything. Kafka is used to make the speed box of the Ruinbringer, which is probably the most dangerous part of the entire raid, more reliable. And outside of this, she can also be used to slow down the first wave of enemies, so that you can buy yourself a bit of time. So I think a B is more than fair. She's definitely useful. I still use her, not all the time, but she has her use case. What's your name already? I don't know, you're Trapmaster. Trapmasters don't really have a good time in here, to put the least. Iris is not really doing anything, Tuyi is not doing anything. Amia is... nah, she's in single target arts damage. Like, you use her to speed things up when you really have no other option and you have a boss that's fully AFK. Same for Nightmare. Nightmare is just not reliable enough. Skyfire, I am... okay. I'm still going to put her in D because she technically is arts damage and true AoE. But like, why? Why is her CC so bad? Why is her DPS so low? Why did they do this? This is a crime. Because I think Skyfire is a cool character, so why did they do this to her? Come on. Rob is a nope. Show is in a D. The problem with Show is that Show does not have enough force on her abilities to really justify using it. Shirayuki technically is an AoE arts caster disguised as a sniper because she can deal arts damage and she can slow down enemies. It's not great, but it exists, so still in D. Meteor is there to debuff defense, we don't care. Jessica doesn't do anything, you don't want to rely on energy. Deep Color, sorry, but no. Most summons are not going to be all that interesting, simply because they just explode instantly. One interesting thing about summons is that while all the operators get -1 block, summons do not, so you could technically use them to split box. That said, should you use it? No. Her speed can technically slow down enemies in range with her skill, but she doesn't do anything outside of 8. And she's a ranged operator, which is less convenient than the ambushers. I'm gonna put her in D. She's a copium option that you take a look at and you go like, okay, I guess I could use this. Doberman is a nope, 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 nope. Estelle doesn't do anything. Bianca doesn't do anything. Courier is joining the Vanguard Club of the whatever, I guess. Mouse is not doing anything. Frostleaf has too much effing RNG on her crowd control. You don't want to be relying on RNG to make things work. Matamaru doesn't do anything. Quora doesn't do anything. Gumby doesn't do anything. Mataron doesn't do anything. Technically, we splash with side slow. Susur doesn't do anything. Myrtle goes to join. Yeah, next to Texas. What is the reason? There you go. Journal doesn't do anything. You join the Vanguard Club. Vermel doesn't do anything. Ethan is the 8 here. I don't think he's the best, but he's... if he didn't have downtime on his skill too, yeah, it'd be in the easy S tier. But usually you want to give him the camouflage food. That said, combined with another ambusher, yeah, he can just stop a raid in his track for such a long time. Actually, I'm gonna... there we go. Feature, Manticore, Ethan, they will be asking on joining soon, and you can combine some of these to perma-stall most raids. So there you go. May, only single target. All bosses are immune to stun, sleep, levitate, and stun, sleep, levitate, and freeze. Apart from the Dauntless Linebreaker, and we don't really care about that one because we got enough options. So in effect, she's not doing anything. Doesn't do anything. Doesn't do anything. Utagi, no, no, no. Ponenko technically is a copium AoE art silence. You don't want to be using Podenko, but I guess she's an option. Click is just here to speed things up. She doesn't do anything. Vigna, no, no. You again, the silence is not that interesting. You're better off just killing the explosive slugs from range. Astrodrop doesn't do anything. 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 Tacticians. Tacticians are a bit of a weird one because Vigil is actually decent. Beanstalk, I think you could make use out of her kit by reducing her SP cost and spamming her skill 2 to bait some shots. It's not like Mission Web because it's a lot more active and requires quite a bit of investment, I guess, to bait the attacks from the Serrator. I can see some use cases. I think you can use her for some stall. She's just not that great of an option. Mia doesn't do anything, doesn't do anything, doesn't do anything. Just it's just there to speed things up. Or she technically reduces res, but it's like whatever. Ritano is... Is she deserving to be in D? Are you really using it? I guess. Gravel is a fast reploy. You can actually make use of fast reploys by giving her like some food that pulls the enemy in a certain direction, or you can give her plus block food so that she can split box some bosses. She's not that useful in the grand scheme of things most of the time. She can also be used to bait the Serrator. Basically, all the things she does are not that significant, but there are enough of them that I think she is better than just did here. Orchid doesn't do anything. Nothing, 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 nothing. Not available. Fang, I'm sorry, but you're not joining the Vanguard Club because your DP generation is just too bad at this point. Same for Vanilla. Does nothing, nothing. Yes, I think even Lava is still... I think Lava is still going to be more worth it than all those operators in RIP. Yes, that includes SURTR, I know. But it turns out that when you have 128 enemies stacked, you take a look at Lava's DPS, it may be bad, but multiply it by 100 and suddenly you're like, that's not too bad. Does nothing. Yetto! Vanguard! I would argue that she's better than Gravel, because by default she gets the reduced... She starts at 2 block. She loses 1. So she's going to be able to split box no matter what. And she can be used as an emergency 1 block against a bunch of bosses, and also benefits from a reduced deployment to be available more often. I think she is a B. Is she at the same level as Gravel? She's between those two. She's okay, I'm gonna put her next to Gravel. Also, special mention for regular array, she is actually nice. You should use her because fast is to deploy with 2 block. If you could give her like minus 50% deployment cooldown food, you can drop her and retreat her, and you get her basically instantly, so you can grab all the resources on the ground. Easy way to save a bunch of resources. Durin doesn't do anything. 12F is better than SURTR, confirmed, let's go. Doesn't do anything, doesn't do anything. Lancet is an interesting one. Because Omni Umbrella technically exists, and you could use Lancet as a way to apply it. So, a quick parenthesis for this. What was the term? On a party. You have 3 different weather types. The only one that matters is Thunderstorm. Thunderstorm is going to do 2 things. It's going to have a constant corrosion applied to all your operators, and it's going to have 2 lightning strikes that appear randomly around the map. The big danger is that if you don't have any healing on your operators and no shields, no nothing, there's a good chance that they are just, well, good risk that they are going to explode randomly. So what you can do if you want to save on deployment slot is pick the Omni Umbrella, which is a tool that makes surrounding operators immune to the weather effects, and Lancet is a robot. She doesn't cause deployment slot, so you can just use her. Though I don't think it's the best way to go about it, but you can do it. Castle doesn't do anything. Fermix doesn't do anything. Dusk. I remember what I said about Beastwax and summons, random summons not being all that great. She can really screw you over if there are rocket launchers in the enemy team. Also, you might just end up speedboxing enemies in a way that you don't want to, so I'm gonna put her in a D. Even though she's technically AoE arts damage with a decent range, she's going to be useful for some of the raids, but you need to be very careful because you can very easily screw yourself over. Saka is joining the Vanguard Club. Hello, Saka. Doggy, doggy, doggy. Lava Altar. Just some random AoE, true AoE, splash. Arts. Mr. Nothing. We'll talk about Mr. Nothing later. Ash could technically stun. I guess. It is a true AoE stun. It's not a good one, but it exists. What you actually want to do is use her skill 2, activate skill, deactivate it right away, and reduce her SP cost. It's not good, because the uptime is not amazing and you don't have the best control of it, but it exists. Trimesters get absolutely screwed over in this mode. Blitz. If Blitz didn't have a limited number of use cases, it would probably be in A tier or S tier. Sadly, I think it's limited to like 4 uses. Let me check again. Blitz. I don't know how to type anymore. Alright. Yeah, flash shield. Yeah, 4 times per deployment. This would have been so good. This would have been so good because you can reduce it to like 7 SP by default and then give him like 1 or 2 SP battery devices, and he would have been able to stun all enemies in range. And it doesn't deal damage, so it will also work against the damage reflect enemies. Why did they have to do him so dirty? Like, come on. Where did I put him? Oh, there he is. I guess I'm gonna put, do I put him in D as an emergency? I guess you could use him as an airdrop emergency, whatever. Tachanka, sorry, but the Lord is elsewhere. The defense, applied racism is not going to work here. There are not too many sarcas and it's physical damage anyway. Evil Rain, you'd think you could do some cool tricks with camouflage, but you have like a bunch of tools that make it so much easier to apply anyways that in the end she doesn't see any use. Passenger is technically arts damage with multi-target. It's like, it's not great, but whatever. Like, it doesn't do anything. Scale the Altar can technically be used with skill 1 to absorb some of the damage. For example, along with Kyubi, I'm gonna place her in C. She's not the, you don't really care about the flat damage, you know, the increased defense. You just care about absorbing some of the damage. Gladia technically has a true AoE pull. Now, I did say that pull was not that good, but the fact that it's true AoE, that it's decent range, that she does have a modular that increases strength, she's not going to be that useful, but sometimes you can decide to pick her. So, C. Calcite doesn't do anything. Sorry, monster is just going to explode. Carnelian. I know someone who is going to be very annoyed that I don't put her in the RIP tier, but sorry, I do have to go by my own rules. I think she's going to be in a C because she does have true AoE, arts damage. The range is not that great on skill 2, and skill 3 can be used to blow up some raids decently efficiently. She has more damage than Lin, and Lin can't really make use out of her SP recovery from being hit, because if she gets hit, then, well, she explodes and dies. So, C. Kirara. Kirara is arts damage with a tiny bit of slow, but it's really bad. They really did her dirty because the only crowd control that she has is minus 20% movement speed, and that's with a module that is available to all ambushers. So, true AoE, some crowd control, arts damage. At least she has all this. I guess you could put her in C. Do you put her in C? Is her crowd control good enough to justify so? Nah, probably not. Bena doesn't do anything. Indy, go, 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 go. Can bind the enemies within range. It's not the most reliable, it's RNG, but it's still a decent chance. Do you want to be using it in the end? No, let's be honest. It's nothing like Ethan. Yeah, I think it's good enough to still be in C. Palace doesn't do anything. Chin Altar technically slows down enemies. Nah, there are better options, like you really should not be using Air ever. Mizuki does have some crowd control, which is actually better than Kirara. Is it the best crowd control ever? Is it worthy of a B? No, it's a good C, I think. It's a good C. La Pluma doesn't do anything. Psychic. Along with the Vanguard squad. Possibly a bit higher. I'm still going to putter with the other Vanguards obviously here. She gives attack speed, so she can be used to reach us by a specific breakpoint. We don't really care about the fragile effect, so for the most part it's still going to be DP mostly. Mulberry. C. A few notes about elemental damage. Sometimes if you have a team that's bursting down a raid, which has some amount of damage reflect, you don't want to get screwed over by bad timing with like corrosion effects, so you could technically use her. Also, she can heal to some extent, which is nice for say damage reflect, and the very wide range is useful combined with a food that grants SP, either flat SP every 2.5 seconds or just a straight up 0.5 SP recovery to lies within range. So she's useful. If you don't have a altar, you can definitely be picking Mulberry. Honeyberry will be joining her fairly soon. Roberta. You'd think a shield to become immune for 1/8 is useful, but the fact that it takes so long to apply it is a big no-no. SLUG doesn't do anything. Fartooth doesn't do anything. Near altar on skill 2 stuns into true AoE, and she has a few shields. So you can combine her with a bunch of block to be more kind of an emergency button. I'd say you don't want to use her in regular gameplay, more so when you feel like you're going to screw up. Flametail is joining the Vanguard Club. Boing. Corzeron is Ifrit but bad. That said, it's still long range, it's still arts, it's still true AoE, so C. Honeyberry joins the Mulberry. Wait, where is it? There. White Man doesn't do anything. Pudding. Next to Passenger, because why not? Justice Knight, no. Gnosis is between A and S tier, because technically it can perma-freeze and all the enemies within range. I'm tempted to not put him in S tier because while it does come with 15 res reduction, it's not bind, so it's not going to work on bosses, and also his range is not quite as adequate. Glaucus has a range that's just like Saria S3, so if you have some ranged enemies, she can still function. If you have some catapults in the raid, you could technically keep them at the exact range, at the exact edge of a range, and she would still be able to perma-bind them. You can't do the same with Gnosis, for example. So, not quite as good, but it's definitely an easy A tier, A+. Kira, Sadie is single target. She does bring some res down, but no, she's just there to spin face up. Ling. I actually looked up Ling because I was wondering whether you could use her S2, because her S2 technically binds enemies. So let's have a quick look. If you're thinking of using her S1 or S3, please don't. There is absolutely no point to it. The funny thing is that you would end up not even using any summon in the first place. Or I guess you could be using the one that's given to you for free, but that's the end of it. She does get 3 seconds of bind. The SP cost is not that high. She could be used to bind the boss with enough SP support. So she's an option. She's going to require a lot of micromanagement. But hey, she's an option. Do we put her in C? I guess we can put her in C. I sure hope you got the very low effort way to stall the rest of the raid, because this is only going to work for the boss. But hey, that's an option if you're looking for it. Aura is not going to do anything. Mr. Lee, merchants get screwed over. Remember that you have minus 50% DP down, so if you want to keep Lee on the field, you have to keep both Lee and Vanguard. And also his kit is not doing that much, so rip. Blind Knight can technically be used to sleep enemies in a true AoE fashion. There are a bunch of restrictions on the Thunderfoot. For example, if the Thunderfoot respawns, the sleep is going to be removed from all enemies for some obscure reason. I don't know why, but that's certainly very annoying, so it's a lot more conditional than some of the other options used. Permastall, in the end, she's not seeing as much use as she should, but yeah, that's why she's in C tier. Crew Salter is not doing anything. Shalom exists in the grave, that's all. Nine Color Deer doesn't do anything. Golden Glow is just here to speed things up. We don't care one bit about the raising or the logo. Even logos is no good. Quirkus gives SP back to allies that she can heal. The problem is that it's actually pretty difficult to take damage in RACC because you have to rely on the weather for the most part. Because if enemies actually damage you, you're going to die instantly. So rip. Shimatize physical damage. Rip. Kazumaru. No, Kazumaru has some mass damage, but it's just no. Enforcer is actually great. Next to air feature. I'm gonna be actually no wait, we already have Weedy. Okay. So now that we have all three of them. Air feature has a low cost and a long range. Enforcer has a short range and some stuns, and his ability doesn't deal damage, so it works against Vanguardians. While Weedy has on her own the strongest individual force, because she can just use her cannon on top of her own S3 to push enemies even further. So usually you just want to have all three of them, and then you pick the one based on the situation that you want. So there we are. Whoops. Own. As invisibility reveal. It's not the most convenient. So I'm gonna put her next to it technically. With S1, she's technically always going to have a target along with the invisible ones, so it's... I would argue she can actually go with Savrash and Sin actually. If you intend to use her for anything else, the answer is probably not. ID doesn't do anything. Rock is just there to spin things up, doesn't do anything. Chestnut, go in the effing trash can. Spectral Altar, on top of having her immortality, which is very useful to block the bosses for a long time, the fact that she gets -1 block means that when you deploy... So, okay, for the Ringbringer, what you want to do is you place Kafka. You're going to make all the enemies around asleep, and since the Ringbringer himself is immune to sleep, you can then safely place Spectral Altar, activate skill 2 right away, because we're going to give her some SP cost down food, and the boss will split box. When all the enemies wake up, they'll be able to simply walk through. So that's how you go about actually splitboxing the Ringbringer. There we go. Lumen doesn't do anything, Irene doesn't do anything, Windflate. Technically, Windflate can give SP back to other operators. Yes, the attack buff only applies to caster, but the SP recovery applies to all operators. But SP batteries exist, so it doesn't do anything. Error 2 can be used as a way to copium sleep the Dauntless Linebreaker and no one else. Why would you do this? Because then you can't really DPS the boss? I don't know. Ebenholz doesn't do anything. His DPS is bad. His S2 is guaranteed to throw some enemies in some random direction that you can't control. Please don't ever use S2 in RA CC. Xerny doesn't do anything. Hibiscus technically can apply as fragility on Arafik if you are really struggling for options. Sadly, it's only on 2 targets, it's not in a true fashion, so that's too bad. Still, we're gonna look for possible answers. Dorothy. I already said it, Trap Masters are no good. You are usually quite limited in terms of space, and you won't really be in situations where you can make the most out of it. I guess I could put her in the... If you really want to have a setup with like ambushes plus a shifter, and then you push the enemies and you place a mine to crowd control. But it's also going to cost you DP. Remember that you have minus 50% DP down, so it's not going to be the best option. Still, she does have a true AoE bind mine, so that's something. As Jenny is just along with passenger pudding. Not much else to be said. Grey Altar is used for one thing and one thing only. It's to kill the... Okay, I guess it's 2 things. You could technically use him to slow down the enemies, but it is RNG, and even if it's fairly reliable, and on top of this, it's physical damage. Like, it is useful for the original slugs, that's about as far as it goes. Minimalist doesn't do anything. Gavial doesn't do anything. Pussy doesn't do anything. Cantabile. There we go. Next to the other vanguards. Well, the other vanguards. At least those vanguards, because those vanguards are actually good DP generation. She can technically get better DP generation, especially since she can get also attack speed, compared to the flag bearers. But she does require a target. That said, her S2 is going to give her camouflage, and she by default has 0 block, so you can just safely put her in front of a raid, activate her skill 2, get your DP, and then retreat her, and you'll be set. She's there to give you a burst of DP early on. Molnar doesn't do anything. Proviso applies silence. She can apply silence. I think she has a single instance of AoE arts damage on all targets within range. No, that is not good enough. Imo doesn't do anything. We don't have the lip. Luo. I think he has odds damage. I don't remember, but I already checked his kit long ago. I'm gonna trust my past self and say that. Nah. Stainless. You don't care about his SP batteries. You don't really care about the turrets because you don't want to be using the turrets when you could be using the net launcher. You could combine him with Puzzle, but nah. He cost would you? I guess you could pot him in D. Alright, I'm gonna be putting him in D. British boy. Take that doesn't do anything. Paprika doesn't do anything, doesn't do anything, doesn't do anything. Flex Altar. RS3 is actually, I think, not the most reliable, but it is on a true AoE stand with some arts damage. Next to Waifu. I think Project Red is better just because it's actually instant, so you actually can land Project Red skill 2, while Text Alter is not actually guaranteed because there is a tiny bit of delay. So what can happen is you drop Text Alter and she just explodes. That said, she does get 0 block, so it's only for ranged enemies. I guess okay. I guess we can put her there. There's Phantom here after all. Vigil. B plus, A tier. I think B plus. B plus. Basically, his role is to stall some bosses using the walls. The walls can only die one at a time, so Even the enemy deals 5 million damage, what do you care? Basically, you give him a bunch of SP batteries, you place the wolves on top of the boss, and you let the boss be stalled until the hit death of the universe. Luna Cub is very great, like she's very cool if you need someone to explore an area because she has permanent camouflage without using any food. So for the early game of regular array, if you have a Luna Cub, just get her to E1 and use her to do some spotting for you. Outside of this, doesn't do anything in regular array. Levitate is a really bad crowd control. I really want to complain about it, but I'm going to do it at some other point, otherwise it's going to be there for a long time. Quad is a statistic in a universe where statistics statisticers than she statistics, so she's statistic not. Read Alter. I don't think she's S tier because technically Arts Fragility she brings 30%. But she also explodes things. I think Saria is generally better than she is. But she's on A tier. She's on A+. She's easily on A+. Not quite S tier. Because her debuff is not the strongest. It's not the same targeting as QB. So when you're trying to burst down a raid, it's more difficult to get control of it. And also she's going to lag your PC to hell and back if you use her S3 and people start exploding. So that's something to keep in mind. Harmony slows down the targets within range with skill 2, doesn't deal any damage of her own. She's more of a copium option than anything. Puzzle. A tier. I have a video about him. You give him a net launcher, you give him a food with 30 attack speed, thanks to the minor ingredients, and he's going to produce so much DP that you won't need anyone else producing DP for you. So that's why he's in A tier, while the rest of the vanguards are, they are just in B. Lean. So what is Canadian? Canadian is in C. But Lean is in B, even though she has less damage. Why? Because Lean can actually damage the Vanguardians that reflect arts damage and stay alive. Also, it's true UE arts damage, just like Lean. She doesn't have the crowd controls that Canadian can bring. But hey, dealing with the damage reflect enemies is very nice, so B. Fire Whistle is technically long range, truly arts damage. It's not great, but it's still a D. Chungyu doesn't do anything. Levitate is bad. Why did they make it so bad? I don't know. Jaehyun technically has some crowd control, but I don't remember the exact value. It is 50 movement speeds. Okay, I guess. Okay. I guess she is deserving. What do I put her? There you go. Copium option D. Chubai is amazing. Chubai is very low effort permastall on a single target at a long range. You should be using your Chubai. You don't really have many ways to permabind the Accelerator, for example. Basically, it's either Glaucus or Chubai. And yeah, that's it. Just give her like, you should aim for like 33 attack speed, so you can like place a Vanilla Wing or a tile and then place Chubai. Or you can just give her a bunch of attack speed from the food or whatever. Minus 40% SP cost. And you're set. She will be able to permabind everything. And she will be able to do it in a true AoE fashion. True AoE. In a fully AFK fashion. Sorry. Misinformation. Wind Chime is another statistic in the world of statistics where statistics stronger than her. Yato Ultra doesn't have crowd control. She is a fast redeploy, that doesn't do much else outside of her fast report, so she's going with waifu. Results SLUG. Technically can get a shield on one of his skills. You should not be doing this ever. Terror Research Commission. No. Ines is not actually mandatory, but the utility and the flexibility that she provides is an easy A tier. Be it because you want some DP generation, which is about the same level as was in B tier right here, or because she provides some invisibility reveal, or because she provides some 30% movement speed reduction without even being on the field. Basically, she does plenty of things, and it's very hard to find someone who does all the things that she does for, well, in a way that's as easily provided as with her kit. Is that even English? Am I speaking English? I don't know. Morgan, nah. Simon doesn't do anything. You original is the easiest. No, just kidding. If I would like to cope, I would like to say, well, technically it's a pretty long duration stun. For when you deploy her, it doesn't really matter that it also stuns your allies because you could place her in a specific spot. And yes, she's going to have a redeployment cooldown of fucking 2,000 days because by default it's already run out, but whatever. Okay, yeah, just straight. Olayak is like Angelina, but less convenient. Still, it's weightless. Shifting is very nice. There is one situation in which Olayak is better, and it's if you have a constant flux of enemies coming in, and yeah, you just want to play weightless to all of them, and you don't intend to deal any damage to them, just throw them down a hole, then she's going to work. In other situations, just use Angelina with a bunch of SP cost down. Because Angelina can just be put safely in the corner of the map, you don't have to think about her, and you'll be fine. Mumu. Technically as a bind on a single target, though it will need to be cycled. Technically she also generates DP, but she's a tactician, she costs a lot of initial DP. Summons are not quite as useful. You can find some use cases for her. Is it a C? I guess a C plus. C? Something C. Silent SURTR is used to give you 10 extra seconds when bursting down a Rafik, which is very valuable. She can also be used in some other raids to, well, make it so that you burst down an entire raid and get this extra 10 seconds in. It has some use cases. I know it sounds cheap for an expiration for someone who is being put in A tier, but Rafik is spooky, and 10 seconds against a Rafik, very valuable. Meta Knight doesn't do anything. Tristan, just because it costs 3 DP and is a block that doesn't cost deployment slot, that can split box a Rafik and gets a shield, D tier. Literally, the only use cases I have for Tristan is straight in the abyss. I want to push back a Rafik for a bit, just to wait for the projectiles to land. Technically, not even necessary, so it's just a bonus. FedEx doesn't do anything. Insider doesn't do anything. Right now, my voice is being a bit raspy, so give me a minute while I grab some tea, alright? So, while I'm sipping this tea, I just had some wet shower thoughts. If you had some tea bags, you should keep some around as a protection, because Mumu is summoning a bunch of clones that are made of water. So what happens if you throw a tea bag at her clones? Does it turn into tea? That's probably not a very respectful thing to do, to start throwing at like a bunch of tea bags at people just to check whether they are the actual thing or just a clone. But I mean, Mumu has done it to herself, so anyway, back on topic. Spuria. Spoiler for CN. The geek archetype has been changed. Instead of losing the HP and then eventually dying, they will drop to, I think it's 1% of HP or 1 HP. Basically, they don't die anymore from their trait. Is it useful, especially since she's buffing snipers, which are, well, they are mostly physical damage, so you're not gonna be doing much with it. You could combine her with Shu to force the summoning of a tile, so I'm gonna put her in D, and Shu will probably be joining her. You'll see why. You'll see why. Typhoon is physical damage. Crowd control is not reliable. Bye bye. Santola is Truiwi. She does provide freeze, which also reduces the res of enemies, and you could bring her SP cost down quite a bit. Now I do think it's fairly high. So you have no real way of perma-assisting enemies. But I mean, truly odds damage with some freeze, some res down. Good enough for Mercy. Valakvin applies Necrosis, which is really bad because it's just a flat amount of damage. It's just 12,000 damage, which in normal situations would be a lot, but like basic trash mobs have half a million HP, so no. Alter is where is Mulberry? Mulberry, and Honeyberry. All the berries are here. Yay! Honeyberry is being looked at by Aya and Mulberry. There we go. Swayer Altar is a merchant. Merchants do get screwed over by the DP down and odd. Buncers is just there to generate DP along with the usual crew. Bryophyta buffs defense, which is an interesting choice here. Jessica Altar. If Jessica could have her shield permanently up, she would technically be capable of spamming her S3 over and over and over again. Sadly, she can't do this. But it's still fairly long range, it's still true AoE, it's a stun. Is it a C? I guess it's a D plus or a C minus. I think SURTR is just better, so D plus. Almond, no, sorry, no shifters allowed. Cold shot, unreliable CC and physical. Orderer, technically you could use him with S2 if you're really annoyed by the Dauntless Line Breaker because you want to stun the boss while blocking him, because otherwise he gets 50% damage reduction, which makes it a pain to actually kill. Apart from this, nah, nothing else, so just D. Vanilla doesn't do anything, Delphine doesn't do anything, Verdant, no, it still doesn't do anything. Virtuosa. So Virtuosa has a few issues. Where is Carnelian? Where is Carnelian? I guess it's in C. I guess it's in C, yeah. I've changed my opinions regarding her a few times. The fact that she is going to be, like, in the end she applies 800 elemental damage, 800 necrosis damage to all enemies within range, not quite permanently, but basically as if. She does so without having to attack herself, which is useful against the damage reflect foes. But as you go on and on and on, it does start to fall off more and more. So she's more there if you're looking for option and you don't really know how to deal with the Vanguardians, for example. In regular RA, she's absolutely amazing. In RA CC, not quite so much. Not quite so much. Viviana. As an RNG shield, you don't want to be relying on too much RNG to stay alive. Lessing does nothing. Diamante exists. Baseline does nothing. Caper does nothing. Degan Breacher. Someone once asked, couldn't you use Degan Breacher to stall some of the bosses? And the answer, it turns out, is yes. It does require a bit of micromanagement, but with skill 2, SP goes down, and a single SP battery, you can do it with a fair bit of margin. It's not extremely tight. Is it a C? The fact that it requires a lot of micromanagement is annoying. I guess C+, C+, C+. Harold is going to join the Berry Gang. Hello, my ladies. Dropping his hat. Ray can bite a single target for a bit, and then she does nothing. Wormy is the cutest pun in the entire world, but no, sorry. Leto. Wait, no, Leto is a god. Leto is a lord. I was thinking of Zima for a second, but no, you actually don't do anything. Zwoli. Next to Orderer is actually perfectly fitting because you could technically spam his S3 to perma-stun the Dauntless Linebreaker, and I guess a few targets. Other than this, no. Shu. Okay, where's Puria? I guess I could pot her in C. So let me explain Shu and Spuria for a second. Spuria by herself won't do anything besides losing HP. I did mention it's very difficult to lose HP in RA CC. Why is Shu not at a higher tier? Because technically her S3 can teleport an entire raid for a pretty long duration. Well, how do you place the SURTR in the right position? You could place an operator there, hope that they take some damage from the weather, because everything else is going to kill you in 1 hit regardless. I guess some damage reflected enemies, but really, it's not a good idea. Please don't do this. So you could do this. You could place Puria on a tile, then place Shu within range of that tile with her S3, activate skill 3, and then retreat Spuria. I guess because there are some ways to combine Shu, I'm still going to give her a B. Like, she's an option. You can make use out of her. Sorry, it's still too inconvenient. Shu is just overall too inconvenient compared to other options. Yes, she can stall, but it's too conditional. Too much effort for something that a bunch of operators can just do with much less investment overall. Wan Cheng. I hope I pronounced that name correctly, because the Ian way of pronouncing it is very funny, but no. Flag Barrel Gang, let's go. Wingbird is limited in terms of targets, and all she does is slow, so nope. Kestrel is joining the Vanguard Gang. For people who are wondering about whether they should be building Kestrel for regular array, the answer is no, just use a 2-star Yato, because it's a lot more effective. You could technically combine those, but at that point just had more faster deploys instead of adding Kestrel. Ella. Is it a D or is it a C? I think it's still going to be a C. So, I'm going to put some very weird image in your head. Imagine someone, so you see Suzerain. Suzerain applies a bunch of fragile and slow to all enemies within range of her S3. Ella is basically the same thing. She throws pocket Suzerain, so she picks Suzerain up and she throws her across the map. That's basically what she does. But every time she does it, she needs to pay the tax. The throw Suzerain tax, which costs you 5 DP. Which is a lot, because again, minus 50% DP down. So if you have a puzzle, it's a lot more manageable. And it's not the biggest fragile effect out there, but it exists. It's an option. So we'll see. Doc exists. Fuse exists. Lena. I think there are some funny shenanigans you can do with Dollkeeper. If I'm correct, she can also reveal invisible enemies with one of her skills. So let's have a look at this. We don't actually care about the rest. Okay. When she's attacked, she applies a bit of fragile and nullifies the attacker's invisibility. And then she switches. Goodness, so many SW switches. And yeah, her skill. Oh, it is very low. It's because the two. Invisibility reveal, not necessarily the most reliable. But hey, that's an option. So here with Toki, you go. Ascalon. Not quite S tier because technically she isn't needed and the odds damage dealt loses its potency as time goes on. But still an easy A tier and definitely front of the row along with... but yeah, basically it was 5. Absolutely massive, true AoE, slow plus odds damage plus very good uptime. You give her a camouflage food and she's going to delete most raids on her own, even not just in regular array, but also in the early days of RACC, up to day like 100, 150, 200. Sometimes even higher than this. She can just deal so much fucking damage. It's pretty insane. Aroma plays Levitate. She's Levitate is bad. Levitate is bad. It's just one, so you don't really care about the thing. It's more like oh hey, where's Corozero? I guess she can be put in C. Long range, true AoE, odds. Oda exist. Lutonada. If you want to shift a bunch of explosive spiders onto a position, you can, but she's not going to do much else, so please don't. Wizardale. Wizardale is not on S. I wonder what to powder. Technically, okay. What do you use her for? C, B minus? C plus? Actually, it would be very fitting if she's next to regular W. I guess she is next to regular W. That'll be funny. She's a flinger. She's going to be used to deal with the Originium slugs that the Ruinbringer summons. And on top of this, her S1 with SP calls down does provide stun in an AoE. It's not with a good enough uptime to perma-stun raids, so it's only meant as a way to slow down the enemies. But it is quite valuable. It's definitely a strategy you can use. So, is it B minus? I guess it's B minus. She's still technically next to herself. So yeah, basically that's her job. S3 doesn't do anything. You absolutely don't want to summons because, as mentioned earlier, you don't want to have a bunch of summons that the enemies can target and possibly kill your ops with splash damage. So yeah, just ignore S3. S2 is actually good if you have a bunch of spiders that you need to kill all at once, which might be relevant in the later days. Other than that, just use S1 and just stall everything. Logos! Is he RIP? Is he actually rest in peace? Rest in peace. No, he's getting urinated all over. I think he's in D, and that's just because he gets a minus 10 res on his attacks. The fact that it's mostly single targets means that it becomes mostly used to speed up on AFK kill most of the time. It can be used for debuff, but generally speaking is bad. I'm finding myself using him less and less, and even for speeding things up, I basically just go like, well, might as well pick an option that actually amplifies damage taken by more than just reducing the enemy's res by 10. So, sorry Logos, but he's sitting there. Honestly, for regular array where numbers are more reasonable, feel free to use Logos. because it's going to delete absolutely everything. Civilized Eterna. Not Ferza, Civilized Eterna. You should sacrifice all your earthly possessions for. So, we have an interesting situation, in which it can be difficult to deal with Fang Guardians because they have a lot of reflect damage. Now, during a skillful use, it makes it so that all the operators within range are basically not going to die to anything that's, let's say, the usual attacks. But it doesn't do much more than this. So I'm a bit on the fence. You should think of her as, with her S3, as some kind of burst heal with an increase to max HP to make sure that no one just gets one-shotted from full health to 0 because they decided to throw an AoE attack into a bunch of Fang Guardians. You could also use her for S2 to bind a single target, in which case you want to cycle her ability with another one. So that would be someone like Momo actually, for example, where you use Momo's clone to bind a target and then you go to Civilized Eterna. It's not too wide of an effort because it's just 2 abilities with a fairly long duration. Not the most useful, but you could go for this. Fang Hunter doesn't do anything. Amiya, Medic. No, just no. The fact that it's single S2 can be used only once, which is fine for IS, for example, but not in RA CC. Fonor. Fonor is basically a Copium Omni Umbrella provider, just like Lancet, so here in D. Old Pianus is a very, very easy S tier. Long range, true AoE, stun, easy to permastall on entire raid with very little investment. There we go. Lucia, providing debuffs to some enemies, basically providing fragile. Is it Lucille or Lucilla? I think Lucilla. Yeah, okay. Yeah, not elites or leaders within range. She does reduce their movement speed, but the problem is that there will often be elite enemies mixed in, so that's very awkward. That is very awkward to use. Even if it's all enemies within range, I guess you could find some use cases for some raids, but she's not getting any higher than D. Underflow sadly has a target limit, and that's just not good enough. Nymph. Nymph is a B, I think. B+. Probably B+. Yeah, B+ is good. You don't care about skill 3. All you care about is skill 2 because it allows you to stall a boss. It does require some micromanagement, and you do have to be careful because a boss, or any unit that is it, will ignore your walls. So you have to be very careful about how you use her skill 2. Learn how your skill use. Basically, it throws a line at the enemy and then it looks at either way 45 degrees from the impact, and the enemy is going to try to walk away from Nymph in a certain direction. So do keep that in mind. If you want to have an enemy walk backward, make sure that the enemy is going toward Nymph to then push them back. You've been warned. Other than this, RS2 is true AoE and it deals necrosis damage. So she's pretty nice to speed things up. She's basically on AoE caster at this point. Tin Man doesn't have much use. His damage is not that high. I guess a D. I mean, I guess, whatever. Narantuya. Sorry, Narantuya. I really like you, but this is not your day. Pepe. Could be used to cycle to permastun some things. However, it's very inconvenient. It's very, very inconvenient. Should I put her any higher? I guess I could put her slightly higher. Like, yeah, she's middle of the pack in the Mitum. The fact that okay, a quick explanation of what Mitum does. He has a summon, his main summon. When it dies, it's going to summon 4 Rex around the main summon. And then it's going to start a timer of down to 15 seconds if he is E2, 17 or 20 seconds if he is E1 or E0, after which the main summon is going to respawn on their own. The interesting part about it is that it's actually really nice if you have an enemy that attacks fairly slowly and you want to bait their attacks. You might have the Sail Raider in mind, and obviously that's going to be his main use case. I'm going to get him slightly higher. But I've been thinking about some particular scenarios which could be very dangerous. You have some global range archers from the Kazimierz event. I think it's Neolite. I'm not entirely sure. But it's the blue archers with global range. They are extremely dangerous, but they do have an attack interval of 5 seconds. So if they are far away enough from Mitum's summons, combined with the travel time, and if he is at E2, it's possible that his summon would be capable of baiting all the attacks of the ranged enemies. I never got myself in a scenario in which it's relevant yet. But I'm keeping this in a corner of my mind because this could very well happen. So it's more useful than a lot of other options out there. I'm kind of tempted to put him in B. Even if it's B-, I think I'm going to be putting him in B-. Peppers doesn't do anything. Sun Rekanar doesn't do anything. Martial, true AoE, decently long range, stun, is yeah, just a better option than most of the other AoE ones, generally speaking. So let's go. You want to use Marcellus too. Laios. So, besides asking whether your operators can lay eggs and traumatize them for, well, basically forever, it is frightened. He does start with 1 block, so it's a bit of a pain. Should you use him at any point? No. But I'm still going to put him at the top of the rip because it's like, yeah, sure. Chilchuk has slightly better DP generation than the Flag Bearer, but requires something to it. So his DP generation is not going to be puzzle tier, definitely not. But hey, still pretty good. So next to Cantabile, fairly similar overall. Well, let's go. Sanchi is not doing anything. Siege Altar is no, the disarm is just a very short duration. The rest is not really going to do anything. She has multi-target at most. Her S1 technically is true AoE arts damage, but it's absolutely pitiful. Just not. Catherine? I think it's Catherine. She gives a barrier, which is not going to be doing much overall. I guess you could use a barrier to like protect your operators from the elements, but you already have a tool that does the exact same and even better, so nope. Bobbing doesn't do anything. Lapland Altar is an interesting case. She technically has some true AoE through the use of her S3. Other than that, she's mostly there to speed things up. The fear from her S2 is more detrimental than anything. In fact, the fear from her S3 is also more detrimental than anything, but it does come with some movement speed reduction. It deals true AoE damage, but it's based on proximity. if you have a net launcher that some of you, for your puzzle for example, is using, the walls might get stuck on it, which is a bit of a pain because that means you can't really make that much use out of a global range. It's also not all that practical because, well, in the end, you're going to put her in a position in which you want her to target enemies that are mostly debuffed. And yes, that means you usually can put her on the other side of the map. Overall, not a reliable option. For regular reclamation or recovery, she's also a bit awkward. And I would say that Golden Glow is a better option. Not just because there is a lot of travel time. I already made an entire video on the matter, I'm not going to go over it. But basically, if there is a resource that is being revealed and it's closer than an enemy, the walls will get stuck on that resource. In RA CC it's not a problem because, well, during raids, the resources can't be targeted anyway. But you can still get stuck on the hunting net launcher, for example. So, a silence can be useful if you want to burst down some enemies' refraction. That's about the end of it. Volpi's Folia. Volpi's Folia is in this very weird spot where she costs a lot to deploy, in large part because she has the Soul X module, which increases her combat performance, instead of the Soul Y. So Texas Vanguard 5-star has a Soul Y model, which reduces DP cost by 4. And because of this, Texas can be used as a way to generate a burst of DP early on in the game. On top of this, Texas also has a talent that provides 2 DP by default, so you can really get your early game going if there are a lot of enemies rushing in. Texas is valuable. Vulpes Folia cannot do the same. Her DP generation is actually very good for Pioneer Vanguard. It's not quite to the level of, say, Flag Bearers, but compared to most Pioneers, she's above. The problem is that you're kind of in this weird situation where you can't really use her as part of Vanguard to generate a big burst of DP early on because she costs too much early. But if you want sustained DP generation, you're also not going to be using her because Flag Bearers are still better. As for combat, her kit is not going to be useful. So she's very awkward. She's still going to join the Vanguard gang. But yeah, she's if she gets the Soul Y module, I think her sheer DP generation may be enough to justify pushing her to C, but for now it's just D. Croneslayer. Croneslayer. Sorry, I need to sip. I'm talking too much. Throat hurts, okay. Croneslayer. Ancien, she gets a module that allows her to permastun enemies on at least up to 3 enemies during her skill free. Well, it's not quite permastun because there is a 2 seconds delay, but it's the general idea. If there's a single target within range, I'm going to be able to do stun. Basically, she is used for the... could be used for like the Dauntless Line Breaker as a way to stun them. There is another possibility, which would be, and that's an interesting one, to basically place an operator. If you screw up, if you mess up because you forgot for some reason to bring an invisibility revealer unit, you could technically bring her to stun an enemy that is invisible and is revealed very briefly because you have very little time to react. Realistically, she's still going to be in a D. Like, she's not that useful. She has some use cases. I can find some use cases. That's better than what can be said about a lot of operators, so that's something. Figurino. What if you make a merchant, but instead of eating most of your DP, it eats all of your DP? That's Figurino. Sorry, Figurino. Contrail. what to do with Contrail? Contrail is an interesting one. Contrail could block the Accelerator, but if Contrail blocks the Accelerator, Contrail is going to die very fast. So Contrail is not going to do much. She's basically here to face check things and then explode, I guess. Sorry, Contrail. Filet. 10 out of 10 design, really like her, would take her on a date, would visit the Sargon Deserts with her. Sadly, she's a defender that wants to be hit by enemies, which is not a good thing here. What's your name already? Send something. You're a snake. I like snakes. I like your face. You're cute, but I don't think you do anything. Techno uses summons. She doesn't really have utility. Also, yeah, you might have noticed we are dead in CN spoilers because this is the next event on Global. Phone's Altar! Phone's Altar is an interesting one. So, if it exists, what do we care about with Phone's Altar? We care about res down. The rest whatever. I guess you could use these S2 also for true AoE, but like S3 is also true AoE, provided you can make sure that the enemies actually stand in his beams. Basically what he does is he throws a bunch of alchemical devices to certain operators within range. I think with the lowest block count, if I remember correctly. Actually, you know what we can do? I guess we're going to be spending a bit more time on the CN operator because people on Global are not necessarily aware of the kits. So, turn 1 is nice, turn 2 is also nice. It's a bit of global attack speed for your operators and reduce attack speed. We're going to go into slightly more depth with the operator in question. So skill 2 is just your standard big AoE arts damage. So you could use him as some kind of AoE splashcaster. Skill 3 is what is actually of interest. Skill 3 basically has a gradually increasing debuff, which reduces attack, defense, and res. But as mentioned, we only care about the res, and goes up to minus 50% res, which is a lot. Ifrit is technically only minus 40%, but that's passively, remember this, because Ifrit can also activate a skill 3 to remove a flat 20 res. I made some math somewhere, which is, give me a sec. And goodness. You know this moment when you have a folder with a bunch of things and scripts and math that you did on the side, and just looking for the right one, and you're like, oh hey, yeah, right, I did write this thing at some point. Where is it? Oh, there. Lobster versus Ifrit. Yes, lobster. I'm going to zoom in a little bit for you. Give me a sec while I swap. There we go. So, these are basically some of the math I did with him. I did some comparisons against the target at 95 resistance. The reason why I took a look at the target with 95 resistance is that it's basically the cap. You won't find any enemy with that high of resistance outside of things like CCB max risk. Even in that kind of scenario where he has the, I guess, percentage reduction, if he goes up to 50% and accounting for everything that he has, overall, Ifrit tends to debuff some more. It's not exactly the entire picture because you also have a bit of a wet situation where you could technically have several S3 going on for phones because you can reduce the SP cost of his abilities. His S3 also deals a surprisingly high amount of arts damage. So it's a bit of a weird scenario where it could be a replacement to Ifrit, but is not quite there because remember that you also require some specific positioning of your operators so that their beams are created, because his skill 3 is going to create a beams of mercury or something between each other. And sometimes you can't really afford to have that many operators in a certain spot to actually do the job, which makes him even if it was as potent as Ifrit, is just much less flexible in that regard. In theory, he has a higher ceiling, but in practice, he's so much more inconvenient that you really don't want to be using him. Still, if you don't have Ifrit, or maybe you are using Ifrit for some other situation, maybe you could afford to use him instead. So I'm still going to give him a B. Alright, back to our regularly scheduled programming. SURTR is a bit like Cantabile. I don't really have anything else to say. Their executions are extremely similar, so whatever. I don't remember what she does, but actually I'm going to look it up. Give me a second here. So what we can do if we actually want to see what the next operators is, I think it's in when allergies are ashes, because it brings us, no, it's Wolfenite. Goodness. Okay, give me a second. There we go. So Shenshu, Zenshu. I have no idea how to pronounce this. Oh well, whatever. So she gives sanctuary and she provides additional heals. Yeah, that's not going to be useful this year. Blaze Altar. Blaze Altar is an interesting one. Let's go. So Blaze, the igniting spark. The way she functions is weird. You could use her S2 to reduce the movement speed of enemies within range and apply some odds damage and some burn. That would basically make her standard AoE caster with a bit of red shred, which is pretty good. If you have some burn, you could also combine it with this. There is a good chance that the enemies don't arrive fast enough because she does use her skill very fast. So it's an ammo-based skill that will allow her to fire very, very, very fast. She's going to go pew, 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 pew. It's okay. It's she's a good AoE caster, splash caster. But that's not necessarily the most interesting thing. The interesting thing is this right here. So when she is defeated, she's going to become briefly invincible, and she's going to stun surrounding enemies. So she gets a barrier to make sure that she doesn't die, and then she's going to recover some HP slowly. The interesting thing here is that technically, if you find a way to, well, kill her constantly, she could just be there, you place her in front of a raid, possibly with a bunch of damage reflect, you let her cast a single skill, she's going to explode due to all the damage reflect, and she's going to stun the enemies and go in a barrier form. You have plenty of ways to restore her HP very, very high while she is in that form. If you have a card seat, for example, that is very far away from her, because of the projectile travel time, technically she could go in this second phase, be at very low HP, and the incandescent projectile will heal her back to full, and she can finally hit again, get back to her normal phase, do a normal attack, and get stunned again. Well, become incapacitated again. It's a bit complicated. Basically, I'll put a link to a video on Bilibili in the description specifically for her, because she got used for a strat in CCB3 where you can actually see this particular interaction. I do think it's possible technically to do that same interaction in RA CC. It's not going to be as universally applicable compared to other operators like OpenEarth, for example, because OpenEarth is just you activate it whenever you want. But the fact that it exists, and that it's a potential way to deal with damage reflect operators, I think is at least worthy of a B+. I'll try to get her. If I do get her, well, I guess I'll report to you if I'm still alive by then. You, not you, you is also an interesting one. Goodness, there are so many fancy operators out there. Alright, so you, what are you doing? Is getting a bunch of sanctuary and is applying a lot of burn to enemies that is blocking, which obviously is not a great thing. However, it does have skill 2. His skill 2 is going to teleport all the enemies in this kind of area that you see right here to his location. The problem is that also he's getting a lot of extra block. So you get to deploy him, activate the skill, and then he's going to explode due to all the enemies, well, you know, just doing 2 normal attacks on him, and that's going to be the end of it. In normal gameplay, regular array, this is absolutely astounding. In RA CC, this is basically an emergency way to forcefully teleport an enemy, as long as not too far, because again, this is not that big of an area. But this kind of an emergency button. It's like, maybe you try to store the Ringbringer, but you messed up your split box, and then the Ringbringer is about to escape, for example. That kind of situation. Then you could be using you to forcefully push back, teleport back the boss, and try again. That could be a way to go about it. Another thing which is of consideration, I don't think it's as good as you might think to apply burn to everything. Because if we can already do it herself while also applying some res down on her own, but it exists. It's one of those things that's like, I guess it's nice. So for people who don't know how it works, basically it creates a big firewall. And if you have some of your arts damage dealer that deals damage, like they have projectiles or they just do attacks that go through the walls, they will apply burn to all the enemies. So that's basically a way, think of it as a way to apply burn to an entire raid. That's going to be most of the use cases with this. It's not bad, but I don't think it's that good. I see most of these use cases being as an emergency button in case you screw up. But it's also a bit of an issue because Unictus already exists, and Unictus has a much larger area, and she also can get to 0 block. And even if she has some block, she can stun all the enemies while the skill is active. So Unictus is basically the same thing, but much better. Still, on emergency teleport, I say it's a C plus B minus. So I'm gonna be putting him here, there. It can also be combined with Blaze Altar if you're looking to specifically burn down a bunch of enemies, and she can go and deal absolutely insane amounts of damage. It's flat damage technically, unlike QB, but oh well. Here we go. Noel is a medic, a wandering medic, and he's going to join the Wandering Medic Club. Hello. Boom. That way we have all the berries. All the berries are together. Antarkia, I don't know. She's a vampire. She deals physical damage. She's a bit like FedEx with a bit more survivability, but less damage potential. Bye-bye. Edlena relies on summons. She's basically a variant of Techno, and the summons have fixed stats. They're just going to die instantly, and most of her kit is just being on some kind of AoE splash caster, sort of. That, but not very good, I guess. D minus. She does have access to some sleep, but it's not even that many targets. Also, it's sleep, which is bad. I guess RIP plus. Wow, what a statement. The best Doko. Brigitte? Brigitte? Is it? Wait, what's your name? Brigid. She's a lobe shooter. She's basically Caper slash Narantuya, and sadly it's not exactly a good fit for RACC. Wolfenite is a trap master, and she's a bit of a weird one when it comes to trap masters because I think there is some manual detonation shenanigans. That being said, I think it's, yeah, it does stun. It does have access to stun for all enemies within range. So you can do the same shenanigan to some extent as, well, Dorothy, where you push enemies and then you place a mine that's going to provide on AoE CC. They walk forward, they get stunned, you push them again, and you rinse and repeat. But it's going to cost you a bunch of DP, and it's not the most convenient thing. So I guess it's still going to be worthy of slightly more than this. I guess we can put her, if I can find Dorothy again, there we go. Next to Dorothy. Big scene spoilers, Monster. Monster has skill 2 and skill 3s that are interesting for most use cases, though in RACC specifically it's mostly going to be skill 2. I think I'm going to put her in A tier. Oh yeah, I'm going to put her in A tier. So, what does she do? She's a chain medic. She's a chain medic, which is not that useful in of itself, and not for the fact that, well, she can get a reconstruct that buffs your operator's attack, but we don't care about the attack. What we care about, however, is this. Allies that are healed will gain attack speed. Now, how do you amplify kill-based damage? You could give her flat attack buffs, but it's not going to do anything for her, so really all you care about is attack speed and damage multipliers. So Arts Fragility, Fragile, and Saria SS3, for example, or Res Down. So this is one of the buffs that work. So if you have an incoming raid and you need to kill them fast enough to not hit the target cap, see my previous video, this is going to be valuable, especially combined with skill 2, because skill 2 is going to amplify the effect up to 2.8 times. Also, it has a whooping 30 seconds duration, so it's good. It's really good. It's a lot of attack speed. It's over 50 attack speed with very little effort. Also, you can very easily reduce the SP cost to have a good cycle. But either way, because the main point of bringing her would be either to burst down someone like Alrafik, or just try to bring down a raid which is going to have some measure of damage effect. The other raids are not going to be as much of a concern, but for those specifically, considering they are some of the most dangerous ones, the fact that she helps with those is very good. So she's going to be on A tier. I don't think she's the most valuable, but I still think that the attack speed is certainly going to find its way pretty regularly in my composition. She's definitely one of the highest priority among all the operators. Next to Blaze Altar, I guess. Elena, I think it's Elena. Elena, no, it's not Elena. Okay, give me 1 second. I'll see you in 1 minute. Good. There we are. So it was Elena, not Elena. Elena is just on Artificer, and our devices are providing, if I remember things, yes, they provide a bit of attack speed. Though the main issue is that, at least this is with skill 1. The main issue is that the devices have a fixed duration, and she is fairly limited. Like, she can have up to 3 devices, and while they do increase the attack speed, yeah, it's 23, it's not bad, but you'd like to have something more. You'd like to have something more. If she had an easy way to both buff the attack speed and also restore devices, she will actually be very nice. She will actually be very nice. Sadly, I don't think she's going to get any higher than a D. Damn it. It has to do with the wind, right? It's Wind Scoot, not Wind Fleet. Wind Scoot is a 4-star Liberator guard that can ignore dodge. We don't care about dodge, and the rest of this kit is just a bunch of flat stats, so bye-bye. I'm gonna place you here. Limousin. Limousin has, and I'm sorry to tell it to people, a very, very boring kit to me, because it's basically all physical damage. No cry control, no utility, dodge, we don't care about. She technically can mark targets and increase the damage taken by the enemies when lateral operator specifically damages the enemies in question. QB is not a lateral operator, so I don't really care about it, so she's on very, very easy rip. Rest in pieces. SURTR, thanks to Mr. Nothing. So SURTR is a bit like you. Her skill tree allows her to instantly redeploy someone that is currently being redeployed. So let's say you place Chubai. You want to stall the Ruinbringer, but you mess up. That reminds you of something. Yeah, I already mentioned it with you. Same situation, except what you can do instead would be to use Exu on S3 and redeploy Chubai later down the lane to get another chance at stalling the boss. That kind of situation. So her S3 is basically an emergency button. It only allows her to redeploy melee operators. Outside of this, she also has a very, very weird effect. And the reason why also... Nice try, but that's not the right page. Her S2 does something strange. It steals attack speed from one of your operators. It also gives a barrier, but we don't care about that one. The reason why it's worthy of mention is that Mr. Nothing right here has a passive where if he attacks, if he spends like, let me check again because my memory is not that of a goldfish, because by the way, this is an urban legend that goldfish have bad memory. There we go. If he does not attack for 4 seconds, his next attack is going to stun the target for a long period of time. Now 4 seconds and 4 seconds doesn't sound that good, but with his module, if he does not attack for 3 seconds, he stuns the target for 5 seconds, which is incredible in theory. Because if you have the Dauntless Linebreaker, you could perma-stun the boss. You just make sure that SURTR uses her skill 2 on Mr. Nothing, that SURTR does not use her ammunition, so she has to face away from the boss, while Mr. Nothing actually targets the boss, and then you could permanently stun the enemy. If this sounds contrived, it's because it is. Because on top of this, Mr. Nothing is a merchant, and as a merchant is going to eat away all the ODP, so you also need a Vanguard to keep that stall setup going on. So you need 3 operators just because you want to be lazy and not stun the boss yourself, like manually. So yeah, Mr. Nothing, frankly, is a bit like other and well, I guess. SURTR, at least, by virtue of the fact that she can act as an emergency button, is going to stay nicely in B tier. Sorry, Mr. Nothing, but that is still not your day. Sancta Parasimo Gun Knight, whatever. What the f is this dude? Okay. So this particular chunky boy right here, Sancta Mixaparato, is a weird one. So he has a bunch of synergies with lateral operators specifically, and a lot of his kit is all about getting a lot of defense. And his skill 2 has some interesting application. If fatal damage is taken during the skill, it will consume 20 ammo out of the 50 that are given to him and negate the fatal attack. So basically 20 ammo consumed every time, 50 ammo total, so he can consume 2 attacks, and he also gets a shield from being deployed just like all the other operators, so he could consume 3 different attacks. Is it that useful? Think of him as some kind of weird emergency Mudrock. Is Mudrock that useful? Not really. It can also restore some ammo to Latin operators, but we don't really care about that one. So, yeah, I guess D next to Mudrock. Next to Mudrock. Gracebearer is one of the coolest designs I've seen. I'm probably a sucker for snake with feathers. She has Nervous Impairment in her kit. Sadly, she deals mostly physical damage, so she's going to be dealing minimum damage all the time. She won't be able to apply it to most enemies, and as such, she is very sadly in Rest in Peace tier. Still, I'm definitely going to build her just for the art style. And finally, we have a robot right here. So that robot is it's a weird one. Confess 47. The idea is that you drop the robot on enemies and they become aware of their sins and need to rest for 8 seconds. So for 8 seconds they will fall asleep and yeah, that's basically it. I have not used Confess because obviously Confess is on CN and I don't play on CN. But the way I understand the skill, it only blocks the first enemy and applies sleep only to the first one with blocked. So it's not like you can drop the robot on the field and then sleep all the enemies for 8 seconds. I don't think that's how it works. I might be wrong, but even if I'm not, just use Kafka, because at least Kafka doesn't have 200 years on her deployment. Still, very copium way to apply sleep to some targets, also won't work on any boss apart from Daughter's Linebreaker, but I guess it exists. Yeah, with this, this is a tier list. Yay! I'll try to put a link in the description to this exact tier list so that you can share it around and be like, oh my gosh, my operator's at the top. See, I told you that unit test was S tier. She's definitely the best operator. And then forget all about the context about the error reclamation algorithm module. But it's okay. It's okay. Definitely, in a lot of cases, a lot of context is required behind the position of each operator. As a reminder, this tier list only applies to reclamation algorithm specifically for pushing critical contention in hundreds and hundreds of days. If you try to use it elsewhere, you're going to be extremely confused. Please don't. So if you ever happen to find someone who shares, say, the tier list without the context, you have my permission to get a gun and shot them in the head repeatedly. It's okay, you just have to shot them in the back of the head, and hopefully you'll agree some poems and people will rule it as suicide. With 20 bullet holes in the back of the head. It's just me it works. Just me it works. Alright, that will be it for the day 700. I made a terrible promise of saying that I would do an ASMR video at day 800. I am extremely scared of doing said video, but I guess we're doing it at some point, maybe. Also, this is a newbie account. There's going to be an adventure with this account happening very soon in soon in a theater near you. Take a look at this absolutely beautiful squad. We're going to reclamation algorithm with a newbie account, baby. We're going to do it. We are so going to die, but we don't care. We can't